Good evening. I've come online again tonight. Yesterday I went online to say I was going to be coming online for about 6 days on the trot, a little bit of a personal challenge because often my lives are very impromptu. They are a little bit again tonight. But I wanted to come on just to fulfill what I said I would do, come on for 6 days to talk about how dowsing and geomancy and my work with horses, the stuff that I've learnt over the years working with them, about how our mind works and how we are very limited in our thinking on many occasions. So hi Polly, hi Tom. If you're logging in, yeah, that's great. If you're watching live, just put #live, #replay. If you're watching replay, I'm here with my advisor tonight. He's obviously very relaxed. But yeah, yesterday I talked a little bit about, what did I talk about yesterday? About time, about how we perceive ourselves going through linear time. And yesterday I talked about how linear time, how we take on board our previous experiences as negative or positive, and we use them to inform our present and even worry about our future. And I talked about how horses don't actually do that. We put human emotions onto their behaviour. So if they've had negative experiences, yes, they learn from that and they might use aversion tactics to get away from it, but they won't necessarily be constantly fretting about it happening again like people do. But tonight I want to talk a little bit about our beliefs and stories and how they can limit our interactions with the natural world and with horses, obviously, which I work with a lot. Now, we are brought up from the word go with belief systems, stories, if you like, about how the world works, and they can be scientific, about sort of, like I say, the mechanistic view of society, that everything is separate and nothing interacts, and I am me and the world is out there and I'm separate. We can have stories and beliefs around religion. They can be personal stories, they can be ideological stories, but our whole framework of reality, we take little bits of these stories that we're comfortable with, and then we build our framework of reality. So this is how the world works. And inevitably, we can be very limited in our thinking because of those stories. Now, over the years working with horses and landscapes and people, the one thing that I know that horses actually struggle with people is our limited thinking, that they have great difficulty getting through to us. And they're often trying to get through to us, but we have such limited beliefs about the possibility of things, or the fact that we can't interact with horses, we can't communicate with horses because they don't speak English, and we can't talk to the land because it doesn't speak English or the language of your choice, because we are very verbally orientated. But none of that is actually true. It's only true because we believe it to be true. Now, over the years of working with horses, one of the common things that, as I said, they've complained to me about, or well, not complained, but sympathised with the human condition, if you like, is that we don't realise how limiting those beliefs are and how they cut off our potential to interact with the natural world. So if you have a belief, for instance, in the mechanistic view of the world, that trees aren't conscious, a rock isn't conscious, the sun isn't conscious, you automatically block off that line of communication. Whereas if you have more belief in the panpsychism view of the world, philosophical view of the world, that inevitably, because the universe is conscious, everything is conscious, then you're automatically opening up a gateway of communication. Now, you have to find a method of communication within that. Now, I'm very fortunate as that I can, like I said, see and feel energies and have other experiences. But one of the mechanisms that I teach my clients to use to open up that two-way communication is dowsing and geomancy. Now, I know a lot of people view dowsing as some kind of weird, strange thing, but actually, it's actually, when you get down to it and look at the sort of quantum mechanics of it, it's a very real human experience. If you only perceive it to be strange, if you have a belief or a story about it not being possible. Whereas actually, when you look at minefields of the mind, now we know that when we have a thought, the minefield of that thought extends beyond our body. Our mind isn't in our brain. We know from years and years of research, there's lots of research backed this up by ordinary scientists, doctors, etc., that minefields exist beyond the body. And when we have a thought, a frequency, a vibration, if you like, goes out into the universe, and we also know that a corresponding field comes back with the answer. Now, because it's not in English, we have to find other ways of interpreting that information. So dowsing is one of the ways that we do it. So one of the things where I'm teaching people dows is people often say, oh, but your hand's moving when the pendulum is moving. Now, yes, of course my hand is moving because I am moving the pendulum. It's a subconscious reaction. I'm not deliberately moving it one way or the other. But the people who often dismiss dowsing are saying, in effect, the pendulum needs to be moved by an outside force. Now, if they're saying dowsing is just, oh, magic doesn't exist, how can they assume that the pendulum is moved by an outside force? What is that outside force then? Whereas actually the pendulum is actually moved by the dowser. So that's one of the mechanisms, as I say, that I use to open people up to this conversation with the natural world, including their horse when I'm working with horses. If you break down the belief and the stories that we tell ourselves of I am separate, the world is out there, a tree isn't conscious, a rock is just a rock. If you start to break down those stories and those beliefs, and if we start to dig deeper and see that actually as a human being made of flesh and blood, I am as natural as my cat, who is a cat, there he is, made of flesh and blood. Now a tree might be made of flesh and blood, but it's still made of the same atoms, molecules, minerals and everything else that come out of the earth that I am. And when you look at the entire universe, as Carlo Rovelli said in his marvellous book, 7 Brief Lessons in Physics, we are made of the stardust that makes all things. Everything in the universe is made of the same things. How it represents is different, but we're all part of the one. And the universe is part of that consciousness. And we are an expression, an individual expression of that consciousness trying to learn. When you start to break down, as I said, the very mechanistic latter-day science of everything being separate, when you start to break down those barriers, then you open up these conversations to talking with the natural world, to talking with landscape, and to talking with animals. So that's really all I wanted to talk about tonight, was the fact that we need to look hard at our own beliefs and the stories we tell ourselves about what is possible in the natural world and what isn't. So if you've got any experiences about suddenly finding yourself in a sort of a conversation or getting messages from animals and the human world in a way that you could understand, whether that be you heard a voice or you had a great feeling or you just had an insight, then, you know, put it in the comments. You know, working with the natural world is not, as I say, is not anything strange. It's part of the more than human experiences, as the panpsychics and philosophers will talk about it. It doesn't mean that it's an otherworldly experience. You're just tapping into consciousness that are more than human. Notice the word more, not less than human, because lots of philosophers will say, who are we as human beings to put ourselves up above other creatures? Because we are all created equal. Now, if you look at the world at the moment, you know, every ant is required, every bee is required, every animal has its place in the structure of the natural world. And if we lost insects, the world would gradually decline. Everything has its place. The most destructive force in the world is humans. Now, if a lot of those other species disappeared tomorrow, gradually the world would go into decline, and the biggest knock-on effect would be that the world would fundamentally change in very detrimental ways. The only species that doesn't hold true of at the moment is us, because we are far more destructive. And if we weren't here, the world would actually recover, not go into decline. So who are we to put ourselves above any other creature? So if we can open those conversations with the natural world through dowsing, through geomancy, or any other techniques that you happen to have, that we are putting ourselves in a much more humble position to work with and listen, which is what I do. I work with the land and horses, and I bring people into that balanced relationship with land and horses, so that they all get, they become a trinity, an equal trinity, and then everything starts to fall back into place and work better. So that was day 2. So yesterday we talked about time and experience, and today we're talking about stories and beliefs. And then I'll be on for the 3rd day tomorrow, talking about another topic. So I say, if anybody's got any comments, please put them in the comment box. And yeah, and I'll see you tomorrow evening at some point in time between 7 and 9. All right, thanks then. Bye.